civilization needs a compromise, right? You can't just have coercion. You have to have legitimacy.
Yeah.
And so people have to feel have a chance to build their lives
Yes.
at a certain level, which is historically determined. And so that's where we are now. So what I don't know what that alliance will be, but I think that the localist or neo-localist movement, whatever you want to call it, regenerative, circulars, all of that. If we can build this alliance with these forces which at this stage, and this is my critique of it, right? It's an exit strategy.
Yeah.
So if you Web3, basically, I think what you're thinking is, well, the world as a whole is not going well.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have this movable money,
Yep.
digital, so I can move around.
Yeah.
So if Portugal collapses, I'll go to Greece. If Greece collapses, but notice they don't go to Haiti, right? They
still want to live somewhere nice.
Exactly, right? But in the long run, that's not sustainable because
Yeah.
you maybe you've seen that last week in Mexico, right? There were riots
Yeah.
against digital nomads
Yeah.
because you can be seen as parasites. With reason, I think, right? So also for Web3 people, it would be very interesting to start seeing we need to build alliances. We need to, go to places where we're welcome, and we will welcome because we sustain and help them.
That's the thing. I need to become a stakeholder. I need to be seen as
Exactly
part of the in-group, right? That becomes existential. Welcome back to the Amagi Village podcast. For Season 2, Episode 1, I'm delighted to be joined by Michel Bauwens, founder of the P2P Foundation and one of the most original thinkers on the future of civilization. In this conversation, we explore cycles of collapse and renewal, the roots of civilization and extraction, and what happens when digital technologies allow us to revive kinship and commons at a global scale. Michel traces the tension between state, market, and commons, the rise of cosmolocalism and bioregional guilds, and how regenerative communities can become the seed forms of a new civilization. It's a wide-ranging dialogue on history, technology, and the future of human cooperation. This is also our first video episode, as Michel and I luckily both live in Chiang Mai and we're able to get together. I'm not the most expert when it comes to video editing, so please excuse any mistakes, but I hope you'll enjoy this wonderful conversation, and we're really excited to bring you many more on this season of the Amagi Village podcast. All these things that I'm educating myself in that we're doing at Amagi Life, sort of cosmolocalism, transmodernism, bioregional levels of planning. I feel that I'm fully steeped in your world now.
right.
Everything that I've been learning has sort of been leading me in these many avenues to your work. I'm listening to other people's podcasts like The Green Pill or Refi, and I just keep coming across you. So it's really wonderful to actually be able to sit down with you today.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure, and I'm always happy to hear people, trying to rebuild community and recreate community. So I'll be following you in the next few months as well.
Yeah. So, to sort of kick us off, I'd like to hear maybe sort of like an emotional, philosophical stake first. Like, would you consider yourself an optimist?
Yes and no. It's a hard question. So I think objectively speaking, we are not in a good period of history. We are in a period of disintegration, collapse actually, but whether that collapse is like from one day to the other, probably not. But there, so it's. I think the basic idea is that the kind of systems we had for and then you can actually go back. So a lot of leftists say it's capitalism, right? And if only we can overcome capitalism, then things will be okay. But if you look at um, the causation, I think it's a lot deeper. Actually think, and don't misunderstand me, I'm not anti-civilizational, but I do think civilization itself has issues.
Right.
Because it's a particular conception of a relationship between humanity and nature, right?
Yeah.
So for me, civilization emerges when groups of people decide to master nature. to get mostly irrigation originally, to get a grip
Okay.
of irrigation, and that requires such a higher level of cooperation between people that it creates a new form of a complex society, but which has this basic idea of extraction from nature and mastering nature. And when you look at the history of civilization, it's cyclical, right? So you have the birth of a civilization, it grows, it reaches a peak, it basically gets old and it collapses and disappears. And then there is a transition period, which can be a dark age in the worst cases. We had 3 dark ages that we know of, 500 year each, and they get worse every time because we get more and bigger as a civilization. So in that sense, there's one more thing I want to say. So civilization is a relationship
Yeah.
between town and country, right? It's getting a surplus from agriculture to basically feed the towns, and then you can have specialized activities and knowledge in the towns, right? And then that creates industry, and then we create a surplus in industry to create a bigger cognitive class,
Yeah.
right? And so each but it's geographic. That's the point I wanted to make. So it's a geographic relationship between the country and the city,
Okay.
right? Which scales up over time. And now we are inventing something entirely new, which is trans-local self-organization, right? So if you think the concept that I use a lot is peer-to-peer, right? So think you live in a small village, a few thousand years ago,
Yeah.
and even today in some indigenous communities. So small scale, everybody around you is somehow related to you, and it's some kind of family relationship, family, clan, tribe, and it can get complicated, but it's basically you're dealing with kin, right?
Yeah.
And you can trust everybody because of kin.
You can
Because
track
they're
those
kin.
relationships. those
Exactly. And they're
transactions
kin of
easily.
you. So
Yeah.
they're a priori, they don't have a hostile relationship to you. Okay, well, I'm just, yes. And so the thing was that as soon as you have civilization, it's scale, right?
Yeah.
And big defeats small. So,
Mm.
so civilization, which is not based on kinship, but on organizing people who are not kin together at a higher level scale, they would defeat and marginalize indigenous groups. Like, they survive in the forests, in the mountains, maybe in the swamps,
Right.
but the main areas of the world were basically controlled by civilization, right?
So it's this mastery of nature to create more, to
Yeah.
extract more,
Yeah. And
and
then
then using
centralize, to manage that complexity, because the cost of peer-to-peer, it doesn't scale
hmm
unless, and this is the big thing, unless you have a technology which brings down the cost of that peer-to-peer communication. That's where we are.
Yeah.
So in other words, what we have done through kinship historically, but was marginalized through civilization, we can now do with digital technology. And we created a new kind of kinship, a
Yeah.
kind of affinity-based neo-tribalism, right? And so that is disrupting the civilizational process. So the future challenge is, how do we merge, synthesize, or converge, or whatever, or replace maybe, this geographical system that we have for a few, maybe 12,000 years.
hmm
And now we need to build on top of that something that is not bound that much by
Yeah.
geography, right? We can work together. If you move back to the US and I move back to Belgium, we can still work together. We can still do a
Yeah.
podcast.
Our
We can-
relationship still continues.
Exactly. And that's new.
Yeah.
That's fundamentally new. So we could do it faster and faster in civilization, but now we have instantaneous, asynchronous collaboration on a mass scale.
Yeah. So from the civilizational perspective, you're who are you optimistic for, or who do you think are going to be the, for lack of better words, like the winners and the losers? Because
Right.
we see these cycles, right? I think one of the reasons that people might be pessimistic is actually because life has been so comfortable that we
Right.
have become uncomfortable with death and violence. But if you think
Right.
about the natural world, you know, the natural world relies on death to create more life, right? If we think about innovation and these Trumterian cycles, it's actually disruptive innovation means that there are people who are losers in this, but their resources and their learnings then get captured for the next stage. So who should be watching out and who's at risk, and who do you think is set up to benefit most in this sort of fourth turning that you discuss?
So in a way, the stage we arrived at, let's say starting in 1600s until today, right, is to come up with a nation state. And you have to think about, like if you lived, and I know European history the best, so I'll focus on an example from Europe. But you're living in an Italian city, a city-state, and you have walls, and certain defenses, and then there's an invention of the cannon and the musket. And suddenly you cannot no longer defend your city, right? So it's the dynasties that have the means to have standing armies. And so if you're an Italian, for example, in the 15th century, you'll say, well, we can't survive as cities. Maybe we should create a nation, right? And get a bigger scale in order to defend ourselves against the French and the Spanish. And so eventually that became like the global system, right? You have a global system of nation states. So we have different civilizations, different culture with different histories, but all of them have capitalist markets and nation states. That's like, there's some anomalies, like North Korea, and then, China has a particular combination which is different from the rest of the world. But basically they all somehow adapted to that situation, right? And then the question is that model good enough for the next stage? And I don't believe so. And so I think the struggle today is between two main paradigms. So let me briefly describe them, and then this has the third one.
Give us a history.
So basically, and this is from a guy called Michael Hudson, who's a very interesting analyst of the history of civilization. He says basically, if you take Eurasia, right, you have a Western pole and an Eastern pole. And the Eastern pole invented empire, right? And it's based on the idea of harmony. The emperor is basically the father of all the people, different ethnicities, which live within, let's say, the Chinese empire, all under heaven,
Yeah.
And it's all about harmony. And then they have all these methods. For example, in China, there was a high tax on slaves, right? So that was to discourage slavery internally. And then in Mesopotamia, you will find things like clean slate legislation or the jubilees, which is debts are freed every 25 or 50 years, right? Okay, so that's like one pole. Strong state-centric. There are markets, but the state controls the market, right? You have the mandarins in charge, not the merchants.
Right. Highly bureaucratic, very systematized.
Yes. But then in the West, something happens in Greece, which is the first time that basically a private class takes power. And what happens in Greece is a revolution against that private class that creates democracy, right? So you have a private class of landholders that lend money to people. That's the extractive system. And then you have the polis, which makes everybody equal politically. And they kind of exist in a permanent tension. And that's why if you look at the West, you have the polis in Greece, you have the tribunate in Rome. So the people are represented. So the conflict is built in the view, and it's maritime and merchant based, right? The traders are very influential. And eventually capitalism is a system where the merchants have the power.
Yeah.
The money has the power. And democracy is always subjected to this tension with money.
Yeah.
Okay, so these two systems are still fighting it out. You have the West, which is mercantile, and China and Russia are state-centric. They both have state and market, but their arrangement is different. It's different polarity, right?
Yeah.
And they are struggling it out today, right? The BRICS ally with China and Russia, and then the West, which is also internally divided now, but basically those are polarities. And so if you look at Davos, which is like the the imaginary of the Western elite, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where they come together every year and discuss with each other. And what you see is that kind of what they propose, the Great Reset is a bit like, let's have multi-stakeholder
Mm-hmm.
globalization,
Yeah.
right? So you have 400 or so domains, specific domains, right? And let's have BlackRock with NGOs and weakened nation states, and we talk together to have a consensus amongst the elites for
Yeah.
how we're gonna do it. So this is kind of what the West is pushing
Mm-hmm.
for. At least like some consensus, which is challenged, but was for a long time like the main imaginary. And then the imaginary of the East is, and the global South and the East is, let's go back to a more equal nation state system. Right?
Okay.
Let's get rid of the hegemony of the West. Let's have all nation states as brothers and sisters together.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the two systems. But for me, they are part of the past, right?
Okay.
They're part of this civilizational model where the state and the market are dominant, right? So what if there was another way? And so there's a long way to answer your question, right? So, okay, one more thing I want to say before coming to my answer, which is how do systems change, right?
Yeah.
And for a long time, especially if you were on the left, you would think, well, we need revolution,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the industrial paradigm, so the pre-industrial paradigm is all about religion,
Mm-hmm.
let's get in tune with the harmony of the divine world, and then we can create an empire and everybody has more or less the same religion. We can trust each other because we fear and obey the same, divine laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
Under the industrial paradigm, it's we're now working in massive factories, in big cities, and the idea becomes we have to organize parties and
Mm-hmm.
mass movements. And if we do this and this and this, we can create a better world, right? So the first idea is basically religious. So if you have a disagreement about how the world should be, you have a religious civil war.
Right.
But once, after, let's say, more or less after the 16th century, it becomes political. The Jacobins and the Girondins and the socialists against the liberals. So it's the area of mass organizations.
Yeah.
And they have kind of this idea of first we need to take power, democratically or non-democratically, and then we'll make reforms or revolution, and then we'll have a better world
Yeah.
that works for us or more people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at actually how history works, it's slightly different in my view. It's basically, so you have a system. It has a certain level of complexity, right? You have matter, energy, and then certain media technologies, information technologies that allow you to manage that
Yeah.
matter energy balance,
Yeah.
right? So hunter gathering, agriculture and mining, industry, cognitive. So these are like levels of complexity. Are still following me?
Yes.
All right. Uh, so, um, so at some point, that level of complexity cannot maintain itself.
Uh-huh.
Two reasons. One is it's out of energy. It's,
Yeah.
like, for example, it's too big and it can no longer expand. So like Rome can no longer get slaves and gold from the outside. So it just slowly collapses because it cannot maintain that level. Or you can have a new media technology, right? So you have, let's say, medieval Europe with the church, and then suddenly you have printing, right?
Yeah.
They can no longer maintain the level of control, right? So either then you go down to a lower level
Yeah.
after the collapse, or you go to a higher synthesis. Okay, so how does it then change? First, you have basically the integrative capacity of civilization stops functioning,
Okay.
right? So people no longer trust their institution. We are right in the middle of it.
So then we have no trust.
No
And the
trust.
trust is what
Right.
underpins everything.
Right. Then we have fragmentation. Paradoxically, fragmentation creates polarization. If you are alone, like who's going to protect me? Who's going to be with me? And this is what's happening now. So if you, let's say, more conservative, more rooted in the land,
Yeah.
right? You want to rejig your religion, rejig your nation, rejig your local community. So that's one particular answer, but it's going down from the nation states,
Yes.
right? Or if you're more intellectual, cognitive class, then it's, well, actually, who is white like me, or black like me, or female like me? And you get, like these new identity politics.
Right.
Both left and right, in a way, regress to another level of where
Okay.
who's going to protect me?
Yeah.
Right? So fragmentation creates polarization. Eventually, you have civil war.
Yeah.
Right? It's not exceptional in the history of this integration. So where to look for? It's rarely in the conflict itself, right? So think about Reformation against Catholicism, right? The answer is a nation state.
Okay.
It marginalizes religion and creates a new civic unity around the nation, right?
Right.
Or think about I use Saint Paul as an example. So you have the Herodians, who, like the Jewish, who want to adapt to Rome, and then you have the Zealots who want to oppose Rome.
Okay.
But neither of them win. It's Saint Paul who makes a new mixture, who eventually becomes the basis of the ideology of post-Roman Europe, right? So okay, so how does that happen? Through seed forms.
Seed forms.
Yes. So you have exit in two waves. First, the people who understand before others that this thing is no longer working.
Right.
Because a lot of people say, well, it's not working right, but that's because we have bad leaders, and if we vote for the right ones, or we do this,
They still want to fix the system.
they want to fix the system. Then some other people say it's not fixable.
Yeah.
Right? It's not fixable. So we need to rebuild something with a different logic from the ground.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the seed forms. So I like to give this example. So purgatory, right? Which is basically that you can have certain sins.
Okay.
Right? And then you give money to the church, and they'll pray for you, and they'll ask for forgiveness for your sins. Right? They still do that in Thailand. It's called merit. Right?
Right.
You give money to the monks, and they
So it's not just that binary, you go to hell or heaven, you make it to nirvana or not. There's some in between that's being
exactly, but that
for you.
didn't exist until the 11th century. And what function does it play? Well, suddenly now you have accounting, you have money, right? And so basically that's how the cities then grow and the cathedrals are built. But so it's a hack. It's an ideological hack which allows Christians to become merchants.
It's not just accounting, it's leverage.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And accounting is very important. I'll come back to that. So you can remind me, and we say a word about accounting. So then you have the printing press, right? So before that, is the monks writing and copying, and then putting the book, and actually, it was protected in a monastic library. And so it was hard to transmit knowledge, and it was slow, and it could be controlled. You have dogmas, and they protect the dogmas, right? Now you have printing, so suddenly you can make 1,000, 10,000 of the same, and you can sell it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have the printing press, and so what you get is a merger of seed forms.
Yeah.
Purgatory, merit making. It's called indulgences. Then you have the printing press, and then you have enterprises using double entry book accounting.
So this is the media layer that you're speaking to as part of facilitating the change.
Yes.
That's why it almost pushes something new.
Yeah. But what I wanted to say here specifically is this idea of a merger between seed forms that creates a new subsystem, that creates new logic within the decaying system. So as feudalism is decaying, merchant capitalism is growing, right? And then specifically in Europe, because we don't have a real empire, the cities are free and independent. That allows the merchants to become the dominant class in Europe. So seed forms are key. So then the question is, now I'm coming slowly to my answer to your question is, well, what are the seed forms today? And I use two concepts. They will be peer-to-peer, and they will be commons-oriented.
Okay.
And let me explain peer-to-peer again, because I think I did it a little bit. So the capacity for two people to freely connect with each other and to self-organize and then create value, economic systems, right? So this is now happening trans-locally and locally at the same time. So what I look for is twofold. What are the people that are creating regenerative modes of production?
Yeah.
So they're creating value and wealth that doesn't destroy the planet,
Yeah.
right? Over the long term. And what are the people that take most advantage of these new capabilities, which are translocal? So it's not one or the other,
Yeah.
it's both. And that's why I speak about cosmo-localism. So, what are the forces in our world that regenerate the physical
Yes.
while strengthening their cooperation at a cosmic level? And I think this is the new modality that is growing within the old world, and that is eventually going to be the model that we will shift towards. So no longer this, because in modernity, the struggle is always between pro-market and pro-state.
Mm-hmm.
There's too much state, we need more market. No, there's too much market, we need more state. And every 30 years, it kind of shifts from one pole to the other. And I'm saying this is done.
Yeah.
And mass parties are done. Now we are in constructive networks that develop themselves cosmolocally.
Yeah.
And then bioregionalism, so you are horizontally in solidarity with other people regenerating your territory, and you cosmolocally learning and obtaining capital from all the people doing the same thing in the world.
Yeah.
And so with that, you become strong enough to withstand hostile pressure from the nation state and from big capital.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's necessary that they should be hostile, right? Maybe there's ways, but there's tensions. And they can be hostile, and they may want to destroy.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do.
Yep. I see, as you were discussing this, I sort of had this lay of the land model, because you sort of founded this in the ecology, right, of extracting from the land.
Right.
And it's through all this abundance that complexity and organization can emerge. It's not just taking from the land. It's not just a purely selfish thing. It's being used for a purpose, right? Primarily for people's betterment.
Right.
But what happens then is you have all these different takings, which to me I'm seeing as like these like sticks, these like lines of energy going up, and then you have this power layer that comes over it, and it is its own system that is sort of, in my head, it's like these different nodes connecting to each other on this higher level, and they have their own balances moving around, and that's sort of coordinated around the nation state. Whether you think about that in terms of like fiefdoms and kings, right? And it's got that system of checks and balances, or like the Western democratic checks and balances of, Congress and the executive and the judicial.
And this is where there's a problem, right?
Okay.
And so, but continue.
To me, this makes sense why things are shifting, right? Because this is a top-heavy system, and it's extractive at its core, because that's a system that it was created that way, right?
Right.
And so it is very sensitive to actually things that disrupt that extractive process. You kind of have to keep getting more and more to feed the beast, to feed the machine, because that's what it's required in order to maintain its own balance, right? But we're seeing a shift. Almost the power structure can no longer exist all the way up here. It's top heavy. It's collapsing down, not all the way to the bottom, but the power here is to be modulated at lower connection to the local, with feedback to the land, right? Because this has been too top heavy. It's no longer serving us, because there's also my physical model here doesn't really account exactly for how media shapes it. But to me, it is like a movement. I understand the movement of why it's going local. This is top heavy. It's no longer sustainable.
Right.
What's going to make sense now is bringing the energy down to organize at this level, where the whole thing shifts in a way that is less like you're on a tripod, which can be easily destabilized, and more just like a mesh root network, actually.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it. So I think, so we have to recognize extraction is necessary, right? I mean, we need to feed.
That's their
so
plus.
life is actually based on that.
I'm taking more than my fair share, right? Because I'm growing. Like fair is if you were
then
everything was
eventually,
fair, you would have just flatness.
right, then eventually you'll die, and the cells will feed. So life is based on that, like, in large part on extraction. It's also there's cooperation, but we shouldn't forget it. And so then we get like the sustainability paradigm,
Yeah.
which is basically, can we do that extraction while keeping the balance?
Yes.
And then there's the regeneration paradigm, which I think is now necessary, which is, we've done so much damage that sustainability is not realistic.
Yeah.
So we need to go for technologies and methods that actually, enrich.
Yes.
So like do farming that actually improves the soil,
Yeah.
right? And that's where maybe it's more interesting to think it that way, because there's a big struggle going on, and sometimes called the downwingers and the upwingers, right?
Okay.
So downwingers are people like degrowthers
Mm-hmm.
and greens, and they say, well, we're using too much too fast.
Yeah.
So we need to go back to a balance. And that means we as humanity have to use less, right? And then there's others that say, and these are the upbringings, that's never going to work. We need to go forward and find new ways of extraction. And if there's not enough on Earth, we'll go to the planets and the asteroids. And you have the Musks and
more.
yeah. So, uh, but regeneration is slightly different, right? Because you're saying there is actually growth,
Yeah.
and the growth is in regeneration. The growth is in resilience. So, for example, the old way is to do monoculture and to destroy the soil.
Yeah.
But as we go now into this kind of collapse, disintegration dynamics, well, now actually it's much better if you have 10 crops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one crop is, that is good for drought. The other is can withstand storms. And so basically, well, we can still grow. That's the point I want to make. So I think we should think in terms of like, we will not lose our Promethean impulse.
Yeah.
Prometheus who steals fire
From
the
God.
gods, right? But I think symbolically it stands for humans. We want to grow.
Yeah.
We can't just go back to like indigenous balance. But somehow we need to find a synthesis between both, right? Between the downwingers and the upwing. But okay, so that's one of the answers. And so I want to say something about Web3, which I think, to explain why I'm interested. So, okay, so all these people, millions of people are doing relocalization, right?
Okay.
So I just read this last week that there are 1,200 eco-villages in France now.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
And 10 times more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you have to know that 80% of them fail. So what that means is there are actually 10,000.
Okay.
All right, to have 1,200 that exist, that means that 10,000 were tried.
Mm-hmm. They never crossed the chasm, as we
they try, but so there's a lot of seed formed, but not all seeds bear fruit, right? So there is a tenfold increase in rural and urban commons, and I have to explain what commons means, and talk a little bit about regulation.
Okay.
So indigenous people, they have like a participatory consciousness. This hill is owned by a spirit, and that's a god, and we can't take too much because they're gonna get angry. So there's some kind of negotiation between humanity and its environment, and there's more balance because of this way of like, seeing yourself more integrated into kind of a spiritual ecology, right?
And whether you literally buy into that or not, it works.
Yeah, exactly. So then the second step is empire. Monarchies, empire, and they scale up human cooperation, and create like an internal peace. The Pax Americana, Pax Romana, and stuff. But until capitalist systems, they actually respect the commons, which is the survival of this older system, right? So if you're like a farmer, and that's true in China and Japan, everywhere, you have your own little plot of land.
Mm-hmm.
There is the plot of the Lord, which you're obliged to work on like 40 days a year or whatever, right? Or in China, you have like nine pieces, and one piece is for the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And So the commons are there as a kind of like welfare system for local people,
Yeah.
right? They share pasture, and they have rules like you can only fish so much. This family can go in January, this family can go in February, and so the idea is to preserve the ecology over the long term.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a counterweight to the extractive system of the empire because, like they're building boats. And to build boats, you need a lot of wood because, before we have coal, that's the main, right? So, for example, China on multiple occasions and Japan, they completely deforest, right? And then and that's when you get a dark age. At some point, there's no more forest.
It goes back to its sustainability. How long can you sustain this growth at this load?
So we can no longer build ships and forts, and now we become, get invaded by barbarians, and we can't defend ourselves, right?
Maxed out your
So then we get a dark age. So in empire, have these cycles, right? Capitalism is the first system that actively destroys the commons. That says, no, private property works better.
Yeah.
And so, everything that is common doesn't work. Let's make it private. And then what you get is that you get, first of all, serial exhaustion, right? So in like an empire moves around.
Serial grain?
No, serial exhaustion. So you look at the capitals of empires. It's Rome, and then it's Ravenna, and then it's Constantinople. In China, it's 5 or 6 different cities. That's because they exhaust their core region and then they move to another place.
The series.
But in capitalism, we serially exhaust the whole world.
Right, because everything's become globalized as well.
Right. And then in terms of it, to come back to regulation is very important, is that we believe that the state would regulate the market. But when the market becomes transnational, the nation is no longer able to regulate the market. And that's where we are now.
Yeah.
Then the question becomes, do we create a global state?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea. Or, and this is my point, should we reignite the commons?
Yeah.
Should we revive the commons?
Yeah.
And I think this is where we are. And let me very quickly say, so the commons is a permanent human institution, right?
Yeah.
Which also adapts to the complexity of human society. So you have hunter-gathering commons. So like, the gatherers or the hunters, when they come back, they share it with their family. They don't sell it. It's, it's a common. Then in the agricultural stage, it will be like shared pasture or an agreement to fish together, right? When you get industrialized, then the farmers are chased away from their land, and then it becomes social commons. So the working class, which dies when they're 35 in the 1850s, they create health insurance, cooperatives, fraternities to protect themselves. So the commons become social, and then they get statified in the welfare system. So the physical commons from the Middle Ages get privatized, and the social commons get statified.
Right.
And they tend to disappear, especially in the West. Now, what happens with the web is that we create a new type of commons that is adapted to the cognitive age, the digital knowledge commons. We relearn to work together online and say, oh, wow, we can, do open source software, knowledge, design. Are we much stronger that way if we collaborate and share that knowledge?
Yeah.
Right. So the commons come back. And finally, the next stage is phygital, right? Is phygital, physical and digital.
Okay, got
right?
a portmanteau.
So we need to, as we relocalize and regenerate, we need to strengthen ourselves by using these digital commons. That's how you get this kind of cosmolocal synthesis.
Yeah.
And so what you have to imagine is this kind of entangled forms of property where, can we support local groups to get control over their local resources and get like community land trusts and cooperatives? But also, can we create a movement of capital, that is sloshing in Web3, $3 trillion and growing, and have that come in a way that is compatible with regenerative localization.
Yeah. And also not threatening to the nation state and the markets.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's baked in? Because otherwise then there's a power struggle between the new world and the old world.
So I don't think we will avoid conflict. If you look at history, transitions are very messy, right? But it's a question of I call it jurisdictional alliances, jurisdictional coalitions. I, you know, and it's a bit cynical what I'm going to say here, but slaves never win. And if they win, occasionally they do actually.
Yeah.
They become themselves the new masters.
Right.
Right. So it's what you get in actuality is you need to find alliances between people at the top, the middle, and the bottom.
Yeah.
In a way that each of them finds some benefit in that alliance. And then you can say there are degenerative alliances and regenerative alliances. So how do we create regenerative alliances? For example, if the local groups can get money on the cosmic level, from the Web3 capital, that's an interesting alliance.
Yeah.
Just as the monasteries in the early Middle Ages, right? So you're Roman, and now you have to follow the orders of a Germanic warlord. The king of Italy is a Goth. So you can no longer go in the army, right?
Okay.
So you can only go in the civil administration.
Okay.
And actually, who is able to do that is the church, right? So which Romans start supporting monasteries. Why? Because their children can be managers there. The abbots and the abbesses, they need educated people.
Yeah.
They can retire there when they're old. They can go to a monastery, and all the books are in Latin. They can preserve their culture.
Yeah.
Right? So you get this alliance between all those people who had left the cities to rebuild their lives, and suddenly you have an inflow of capital from the Roman elite. And then, last step was, I don't know if you know this name, but Clovis, the founder of the Frankish kingdom in France, he shifts from his alliance from his own warlords, who had another Christian religion called Arianism, and he starts supporting the Catholic Church, which is the Roman elite. So you get an alliance that works for these forces, and then you get a new social contract because the priests, the monks, are much more friendly to the people than the warlords.
Okay.
Right? So you get basically some compromise. And that creates a new civilization. Civilization needs a compromise, right? You can't just have coercion. You have to have legitimacy.
Yeah.
And so people have to have a chance to build their lives at a certain level, which is historically determined. And so that's where we are now. So I don't know what that alliance will be, but I think that the localist or neo-localist movement, whatever you want to call it, regenerative, circulars, all of that, if we can build this alliance with these forces which at this stage, and this is my critique of it, right? It's an exit strategy.
Yeah.
So if you Web3, basically, I think what you're thinking is, well, the world as a whole is not going well. Now I have this movable money.
Yep.
Digital. So I can move around.
Yeah.
So if Portugal collapses, I'll go to Greece. If Greece collapses, but notice they don't go to Haiti, right? They
still want to live somewhere nice.
Exactly, right? But in the long run, that's not sustainable because you maybe you've seen that last week in Mexico, right? There were riots against digital nomads.
Yeah.
Because you can be seen as parasites. With reason, I think, right? So also for Web3 people, it would be very interesting to start seeing we need to build alliances. We need to, go to places where we're welcome, and we will welcome because we sustain and help them.
That's the thing. I need to become a stakeholder. I need to be seen as
exactly
part of the in-group, right? That becomes existential because I think this to me is very interesting. I was engaged in some online debates about these protests. And, predominantly American remote workers in Mexico has its own political overtones. But speaking from the sort of global digital nomad movement where remote workers have gone, I have seen these clashes are often, they're indicative of this issues that already existed there often. And this is a tension point which becomes inflamed, right? But
And nomads are an easy target as well.
yeah, because it's the thing, it's you get to
Yeah.
put a label on it.
Yeah.
But I think fundamentally it comes from people being trapped in the idea of tourism. They're not prepared to think about what life the digital nomad can actually lead, because tourism itself is extractive. It's like your culture, your natural beauty is here for my consumption. And we've been trained to think of travelers as being that by tourism,
Right.
especially as it's expanded so quickly, as mass tourism and like affordable like air travel. But that's a bad idea, right? That's an ideas problem, because you're defining the digital nomad as an extractor, where I think very often, I think it's interesting how digital nomads and remote workers,
Yeah.
people who have the same ability to use technology to work from anywhere, but actually the lifestyle side is less about the moving around and more about choosing, right? People who, this leans more into geo arbitrage rather than digital nomadism. Right. And I think that's often the missing picture, because the discussions that I've been having on this podcast, time and time again, you talk to people who did the digital nomad thing, but I think it's natural that like we go out into the world in our youth, right?
Exactly.
And we want to explore.
The stage often, right? 20, 25, 35. And then you start thinking, I need more roots. I need
Yeah, there is a natural cycle. And that's not to say everyone is going to settle in the same way, but I think the natural arc of human life is to say, I want to explore, but at some point, I want to find more meaning in my life. I want to give back. I think that's a natural impulse. And digital nomads predominantly come from high trust society. They're coming from developed nations. They have a lot of privilege, right? That created the economic conditions
Right.
in which like the knowledge economy emerged. And these are people who have very pro-social behaviors in many ways and are not across the board good people, right? Just because you're a digital nomad doesn't magically give you like a crown of holiness.
Yeah.
But as a group, does tend to engage in more pro-social behaviors, and you can root people. People want, like you've talked about the rise of these eco-villages and frame. I'm seeing the same thing. There's so many digital nomads and remote workers who want to find a place to intentionally root themselves. They're saying, I want to give back. Where do I do that?
I'm very convinced by what you say, but I do think it requires more of an effort, right?
Sure.
And so because you tend to be friendly with people who are like you, that's the problem. So for example, pop-up villages, I think they're great, by the way. Like I've been to Edge City, especially the Chiang Mai.
Edge Lana last year.
But it was like a confederation, right? We had 12 groups coming together. I gave 2 lectures per day for like 6 weeks in a row. Then we went to Bangkok. There was DEF CON with 800 side events. So and then I went to this something called Zoo Garden.
Yeah.
Which was in I think it was Koh Phangan.
Yeah.
Sorry. And that's where I discovered this extraordinary sociability. This was very high level trust with all kinds of rituals and, making sure you say goodbye when people leave, that you acknowledge. I mean, it was amazing. But of course, totally isolated from the Thai people, right?
Yes.
Just as an aside, I'm quite favorable to Epicureanism.
Uh-huh.
I'm not really an expert, but they lasted for 700 years. And Epicureanism is like a balance between matter and spirit, and so moderate pleasures that doesn't destroy you is good.
Right.
Based on friendship, right? And they had like 400 communities, and they lasted for 700 years, and they were replaced by the Christian monasteries eventually. And so this is interesting. I because everybody's always talking about stoicism, right? But stoicism is like I'm not affected.
Yeah.
Right?
Detachment.
And I think Epicureanism is really more about community building and friendship and solidarity. And, women had a role in Epicurean communities, even they were like the head of the sometimes.
Yeah.
And slaves could be on an equal level with the citizens. And okay, so here's the way. So this is from Austin Wade Smith. You might have heard the name from Regent Foundation, right?
Okay.
He wrote this really nice article about convivial institutions. He says, okay, what we need is bioregional guilds. right?
Okay.
These are people connected locally to each other. They're doing different things to regenerate their territory.
Mm-hmm.
Some are doing agriculture, community land trust, cooperative housing, this, that. So they're organized in bioregional guilds,
Yeah.
right? And then you have cosmolocal guilds. And these are digital nomads that create the linkage
Yeah.
between communities, absorb lessons from being in different places, and can help local communities learn
Yeah.
and create linkages in the network. So that's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
This, and what you see in Web3 is the guilds are beginning to be formed. The protocol guild, there's even guilds, which is a guild to make other guilds. So there's interesting stuff happening
Yeah.
in Web3. And by the way, right, public goods funding.
Uh-huh.
So that means that Web3 people have found ways to tax themselves
Uh-huh.
and to create funding for collective infrastructure without the state.
Yeah.
So they have they're funding their own commons, their self-infrastructuring.
Is it tax if it's voluntary? Because isn't that kind of just
It's
like
not voluntary because it's like when you use, what was it called? One of these pipes for the wallets.
Mhm.
Got the name now. Optimum.
Okay. I guess
So you pay when you pay 15 cents,
yeah.
like 7 cents used to go to Gitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't really choose.
But
right?
it's opt-in, right?
You
Versus
can
a
use
state.
another. Yeah.
Yeah. Versus a state where you
Yeah.
you were born, you're a citizen.
Yeah.
Like
But in Prospera,
yeah.
there are taxes, right? So that's kind of their ultra-libertarian corporate vision of a network state, and yet they have taxes now.
Yeah.
Because you have to. So this is the collective action problem, right? So I may not need a road, you may not need a road, but actually it would be a good thing if there would be a road.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that collective interest, who's gonna do it?
Yeah.
So that's why the state is there,
Mm-hmm.
or the city, and so even if you're nomadic, you need to answer that question.
Yeah.
How do we fund things that are not necessarily in the personal interest of
Mm-hmm.
any one member, but are beneficial for the whole network?
Yeah. And I think that's where just the regenerative approach really just says, like, we need to close the loops, right? We recognize that this is not just like a linear extraction. In everything that we do, we need to make sure something is being given back. But
Right.
I think what's interesting and why people flock to this is because there's something hopeful, there's something kind about this being an opt-in system rather than an opt-out. Because I think it's interesting right now. I was reading about I think Belgium actually, and they're having these new taxes. I don't know if it's proposed or if it's in action, but we sort of see the movement of capital happening around the world, and a lot of countries are saying like, no, you can't take your money and leave. If you, the ultra wealthy, try to leave us, we're going to punish you for that. But I also wonder if this just that's just the best thing in the world for Bitcoin and other alternative currencies which function on a different system.
I mean, we have to find equilibrium, right? Because one of the reasons life was really good in Western Europe
Yeah.
is high taxation.
Yeah.
Like
It's
Scandinavia,
invested, right?
and so I have a health issue. I don't want to go in details, but I had to wait 4 months now in Belgium.
Yeah.
And when I left 20 years ago, I was not waiting on this.
Yeah.
So you can see how the nation state is weakening because of that capital that was flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what tax is for,
Yeah.
right? And that's now being challenged. But if if you still want like local roads and hospitals, so this is like, how do you solve this? I'm not saying taxation is the only solution, but this is an important thing. And so I adhere to a theory, which is, what is it called again? It's called, group selection theory. Okay.
Group selection.
So here's the thing, like normally in the animal kingdom, it's like individual selection. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a particular insect and it's optimized for a particular ecology.
Yeah.
then the ecology changes, and maybe one of these insects has the right mutation, and then that would become the new thing, right? Humans are different because you have more chance to survive as a weak person in a strong community than a strong person in a weak community, right? So that's why group selection, cultural selection is really important.
Very
So
potent.
basically you have groups competing, and and then also weapons are important. So when one group has a way to win the competition, it goes at the top of the hierarchy, and then eventually the other groups learn, and then and so on and so on, right? And so the psychology of this is that the more cooperative a group is, the more competitive it is. But within the group, there's going to be an incentive not to cooperate and to profit from other people's cooperation. But if there's too much of that, it weakens the group and the group collapses. And so there's always this tension between individual and collective interest and individual and collective cooperation, right? And so if you don't want to be utopian, which is, I wish the world was like this. And
It was so orderly and so just.
you always have to think like, well, you're not alone. And not everybody is friendly to you, right? So there's an interesting concept from a macro historian called Carol Quigley, and he talks about instruments of expansion. This is very important. Instrument of expansion. So how does a civilization grow? Because it has an instrument of expansion. So think about feudalism, for example. So you have the Roman system, imperial system based on slavery and taxation and conquest. But when that collapses, people go back to the local, right? And what is feudalism is very simple. It's you need 100 farmers to fund a knight.
So it always goes back down to that because everyone has to feed themselves, and the knights need to
and defend themselves
and farm somewhere.
Right? So feudalism is first a way for Europe to defend itself because they're invaded by the Vikings in the north,
Right.
the Moors in the south, and the Avars in the east. So it's complete chaos. And feudalism in 300 years flips, and the Europeans are now in the Middle East, right, with the Crusades. So feudalism is an instrument of expansion. And then he said at some point, the people in that institution start thinking more about themselves than about the society. And then they become a parasitic force, and it weakens the civilization. And unless you find a new instrument of expansion, you will collapse. So in Europe, it will be feudalism, mercantile capitalism, and industrial capitalism as the three instruments of expansion. I want to say a little bit more thing. You can have commons-based instruments of expansion, right? So if you think about civilizational cycles, when markets and states go well, the commons weaken. But when the market and state system is over its peak and starts declining, the commons come back. When you have a dark age, that means the market and state system is almost completely collapsed, and the commons institution becomes hegemonic. The monasteries become actually the main organizational form during the dark ages. This is true in Japan. This is true in China. This is true everywhere. Right?
I think this is how you reconcile the tension between the pessimists and the optimists too, because I think the pessimists are just not looking at a long enough time span. My husband.
Optimism is the same.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So that's the whole point. And this is important. So if you live in an optimistic time where things actually go better and better, you tend to think this is going to be
You
forever.
assume that it's a false.
But also when you are going down, like, generations upon generations, like in the end of the Roman Empire, they're always worse off than like today, young people are worse off than their parents, in terms of house buying and stuff, right? So then you tend to think things are going down forever. And if you take long enough temporal view, then you can say, well, it's cyclic. Right now we're in a downward, but if you look at the upward signs that announce the next upward cycle, then you can be optimistic. But you cannot be stupidly optimistic.
No.
Because this system is not the one that's going to be better. That's my view.
I think you're obviously a student of history. And I think that sometimes, I think it's very important that people continue to study history. But what's a problem sometimes is now it's like pop culture history, it's Hollywood history is what people believe. And so much of that is actually just like propaganda and just convenient storytelling, right? My husband, he's that classic, like, when's the last time you thought about the Romans? And for him, it's frequent.
Right.
And so we were talking about
Be a male thing. I heard.
it is. It's a fascination, right? But he was telling me about I think the Battle of Cannae and how for the Romans, usually when there's a big defeat, you still survive. But because so many people literally died, this like whole ruling elite class of the Romans like die, it actually created a vacuum. It created an opportunity for these new groups to come in. And you think about like the Middle Ages, sorry, you think about like the bubonic plague, right? Horrible, violent, like you don't want that to happen.
Right.
But actually, that led to much better living conditions for the peasant class,
Yeah.
right? And you would
The-
think about like the
Like
Doomsday
as-
Book. Yeah, as you think about the Doomsday Book and what we documented at that time, and what emerged from that was actually something that many people would, I think, readily agree was a good thing. But sometimes you only have these opportunities after collapse. But you kind of just hope that, like, I don't know, to me, I kind of hope that baking in death, right? It's required. Some things have to die. But rather than saying the forest being burned and having life having to grow out of that, or the whole forest being cut down for a means, right? What about networks? What about mushrooms, right? I think this is where the analogy to me is very powerful because mushrooms are their participants in death. They are quietly doing their thing, whether that death is quick and violent or slow. And so to me, the emergence of all these different enclaves of people experimenting with these different ideas, things that are rooted in their ecology, there's some mirror to these like mycelial networks that we are studying more and sort of honoring more, as well as, these
we have
original network.
our own. That's the cosmic part for me, right? So you have the local, but then we create all these connections of knowledge, of capital, of solidarity,
Yeah.
and then the question will be at some point. I think there's a declining nation-state solidarity because it's losing its means.
Yeah.
And then there'll be new types of communities who have solidarity, which is not dependent on the nation state.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that going to work eventually? I don't know. But I think we need new type of global commons institution.
Yeah.
But they need to grow first from the bottom up, right?
I want to ask you and come back to this thing that you mentioned about just people and evolution, right? Or at least that's how I take it. You sort of have genes versus means is one way of thinking about it. And I studied anthropology. So to me, evolution is as much your biology as your culture because we can't have humans hardware without the software, right? Our software is why we have advanced as a species and survived, against the odds of our like little weak bodies, right?
Yeah.
And there is this, we are not necessarily primed at the instinctual level, it seems, to manage complexity and like these different layers of these different orders of at the systems level, right? And despite students of history know that like communism has a bad track record, and yet young people generationally all seem to flock to communism. And to me, that speaks to, I think, an instinct. Like there's something in us, and I don't want to dismiss it as like childish and naive and something to be viewed in contempt, but actually like let's honor that there is something I think baked into us that says communism seems right because it seems fair. But to me, communism fundamentally doesn't work because it's imaginary. It's an idea. It's ideals. If the world actually worked that way, wonderful. But no, like communism is not anchored in biological, physical, human reality. And that's why it cannot work. But I think we're not giving young people perhaps a good enough meme to catch on to, Because even if the
But I think the
people,
commons can work. You see,
that's why I think that's why we're
yeah.
offering a new exit path,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's why I think it's almost like we don't need like communism as a sort of collective has been very good at rebranding, actually,
Yeah.
right? That's why I think it pops up so much, and it can escape the filters even of students of history, people who have some awareness,
yeah.
right?
Now, I actually do have a slightly different opinion on this, right? Um, so this is a Japanese philosopher
Uh-huh.
called Kojin Karatani. He wrote a book which I really love. It's called The Structure of World History.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, you have four modalities of value
Mm-hmm.
that exist in every epoch, in every region, but with different dominations. Like, so mode A is gifting and commoning,
Yeah.
right? Commoning is you exchange with the whole. So the hunter comes back, with a deer. It's probably a group of hunters, and it's not sold. It's for the group or for the family, and there's different ways to share it, right? Amish, when a couple marries, the whole community build their house,
Yeah.
right? That young couple doesn't have to give anything back to any individual, but when another young couple marries, they'll have to also help,
Yeah.
right? So that's commoning. Gifting is so commoning is very good in the nomadic period of humanity. But once you have a fixed horticultural village based,
Okay. You're very heavily invested.
yes, now you cannot move, right?
Yeah.
So that means if you have a conflict, what do you do? And so by gifting, you create good relationships with your neighbors, right? So gifting becomes this kind of creates social relations of mutual dependence. So that's gifting. So this was the dominant way in kinship-based tribal civilizations. Okay, so then you have conquest, and that creates he calls it authority ranking, mode B, and the state essentially. You have a hierarchical
Yeah.
organization. Then comes the market, right? Mode C. Then it says, and this is very important, and so I will tell you how communism fits in that. So so we are primed for convivial life.
Yeah.
Because we live for hundreds and thousands of years in tribal,
Small
right?
groups. Yep.
And unfortunately, civilization alienates us from this type of life.
Yeah.
Too big, hierarchical, too much coercion, obedience,
Yeah.
having to work with people you don't know.
Atomization of culture, right? It's so
Atomization.
natural that
Right.
people yearn for something. They know
Yeah,
that something's missing.
Okay. And so what he says is that, and this is what he calls mode D, the
Yeah.
permanent attempt to recreate mode A at a higher level of complexity.
Yeah.
So first through religion. I don't know if you're familiar with the actual religions, right?
No.
So basically, one of ways to look at civilization history is to say, okay, people find new ways of extracting value,
Mm-hmm.
and that will create chaos,
Yeah.
right? So competition, and those who extract the best go at the top. But this is a violent process of extraction. So then you get a counter reaction. So a new coordination engine creates the need for a new, and he calls it, what was the name of the guy? I'll come back. But anyway, purification generator. So the world religions were attempts to civilize the warrior class,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
And then they created more balanced civilization model with
Yeah.
more community and respect.
So that the strong man didn't just
Exactly.
live, right?
Yeah, you can rape and pillage when you go out, but when you come back, you have to respect,
Yeah.
the religious rules. Then the next step is when we have industrial society and we become secular,
Yeah.
mass political movement. So this is a difficult world. We immanentize the eschaton. Eschaton, the end of times, in the perfect utopia. Now we say, okay, if only we do this, then we can have a perfect future, right? And so what we get is the Reformation, Marxism, socialism, liberalism, and it's always the same. If we achieve power, we can reform society and make a better society.
It's by its nature extreme ideological because it's reaching towards something.
It's based around joint ideology because there's no more religion, right? And it creates a better future, and people mobilize to achieve that better future.
Yeah.
And that's basically what politics has been about, but it's now degenerated. And so how do we do it now?
Yeah.
Right? Because that impulse is still in us. Like we don't want to live this atomized, lonely life. So I think constructive networks
Yeah.
is what we need today. So we are constructing through seed forms, and we are, showing in practice the life
Yeah.
we want. And we're doing that by creating these mycelial networks
Yeah.
and strengthening each other. So that's Mode D today.
Yeah.
Mode D today is no longer politics.
Mm.
It's constructing new lives.
Okay.
And so here's my view then of communism, right? So what we shouldn't forget is that around 1850, if you're a working class person, you die when you're 35,
Yeah.
right? Like 80% of your children will die. That's
It's a hard life.
a hard life. And that created a need for an alternative.
Yeah.
And what we know as communism is an attempt to do that with a centralized state, right? Because we had destroyed the commons, basically. And um, I see there's another way to achieve modernity, basically, right? It wasn't, and I think this is important, that it worked,
Yeah.
but only for industrialization, right? So if you look at Russia and China, they were growing 3 times faster than the capitalist world. So they're actually successful industrially at a very high cost,
Yeah.
but capitalism had also a very high cost. There's a book called Victorian Holocaust. We killed a lot of people in the 19th century, to grow the way we did.
Yeah.
And similarly, China and Russia, there were a lot of people were killed. So what failed in Russia is the adaptation to the cognitive age, right? I don't know
Okay.
if you know this, but the internet was invented in Russia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And, they had cyberneticians, and they created a system. I forgot the name now, but basically the idea was to have, decentralized planning, right? And then when the parties saw this, they said, no, no, we don't want to lose control. And they shut it down. And that's the moment for me that Russia was done, like finished. And neoliberalism,
Yeah.
let me tell you how neoliberalism was created. So basically, in 73, you have Allende in Chile, right? A democratically elected socialist president. And then there's a strike of truckers. And truckers are small capitalists. They
Yeah.
own their trucks. And
Okay. Yeah.
they don't want this socialist government. And he calls in a cybernetician called Stafford Beer, who comes from England. And he creates this war room called CyberSyn, right? And they use fire brigades and ambulances, and they succeed
Mm-hmm.
in creating an alternative transport system through this digital coordination.
Okay.
Very early, 73, right?
Okay.
So when Pinochet does his coup, the first thing he does before bombing the palace is bombing CyberSyn, right?
Wow.
So these are the Santiago boys. And what you then have under Pinochet invites Milton Friedman,
Mm-hmm.
the Chicago boys, and they basically create the basis for neoliberal order using the same techniques that they learned from Stafford Beer,
Yeah.
but now they use it to do this, global capitalism where you have, these empty corporations with money, but then you have these whole networks of physical producers in the whole world collaborating, right? So, this is the end of my thesis: is that capitalism succeeded because it adapted successfully
Mm-hmm.
decentralized cybernetic coordination, and state communism didn't,
Right.
right? And then China is special because then they found a good way to compromise. And this is what I think people in the West often don't understand, is that the state was always in control.
And
Right.
how does this circle back to, you sort of pointed out, Europe, mercantilism,
Right.
Asia, empire?
Right. Well, it's still, in a way, the Chinese system and the Russian system, right, is still a way to maintain the state at the core and the market in a subordinated position. So, in other words, you cannot be an oligarch in Russia or China without the agreement of the state, but you cannot be a president in the West in the US, got the agreement of, you need billions and billions to be elected, right?
Yeah.
So this is still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what's also new, of course, and this is what a culture war is about, right? Both internally in Europe and the West, and then on the global level. So people like Dugin, and there's a Chinese equivalent to him, but I forgot his name now. He's in the Politburo now. These are people who were horrified by what was happening to Western culture, right? And so they became civilization states. So they if you look at the ideology today in China, in Russia, in India, they're no longer Westphalian. They're not empty liberal nation states. They are going back to their civilizational core, and they're trying to make a new synthesis, right? So now you will have in every city in China with like 40,000 people, they'll have a Confucian Institute,
Yeah.
right? And they're teaching people traditional Chinese philosophies. And the same in India, with the Modi and Hindutva, and in Russia with the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
So they're creating a kind of a more conservative model, right? And the same is happening in the West, and that's why it's hard to understand why Trump is sympathetic to Russia. But it's actually because they share something which is uh kind of like conservative impulse. Despite the fact that he is also revolutionary in many ways, but they're especially in Europe. You look at Hungary, Poland. They share this desire to go back to a civilizational identity, right? And then within the West, you have this struggle now between the liberal faction,
Yeah.
which is usually highly educated urban people, right? And they're usually single, and not all of them, but very high levels. And then the more rural people and working class people still are in the physical world. And yeah, this is a big tension. But for me, the answer is not in that struggle, right?
Okay. You don't
That's
feed that fire.
Yeah, that struggle is like to industrial era, like degenerating.
Right. It's going to fill out on its own because of the tensions that underlie.
Well, we might have civil war,
Fair enough. Yeah.
but there's no solution. And I think the one quality I think Trump has is to so quickly show that this is not a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think the old way was a way either, right?
Yeah.
And so I think increasingly we're seeing that the solution is not there, right? It's not into traditional politics. It's no, we need from the ground up to create sustainable, regenerative communities, but that are linked translocally and able to survive and thrive in the chaos.
Yeah. It's very interesting to me, because I'm half Thai, half American, and just observing on the American side, it's funny that so many people want to go back to the land. It's the people I know who are coming from like the red states, who are, I have family and people I know in like Appalachia.
Right.
Right. And so that's an area, like a beautiful part of the world where many people are building homesteads. Some of them already had that age and they're honoring that. And many people have uprooted themselves. They moved from urban areas to try to go back to this part of life. And then on the other hand, I'm speaking to all these digital nomads who are settling in to existing eco villages or founding intentional communities who are similarly, but just from a completely different life passing, like I want to be in sync with the land. I think that that makes sense. And there's something of the world of ideas is very powerful, right? You've sort of spoken to how these abstract concepts, right? Like thinking about purgatory allowed us to have the leverage to go do things.
We are made of stories, right?
Yes.
We are narrative beings.
Yeah.
I sometimes say the universe is constituted by meaning, not by atoms.
Yeah. No, I'm very with you.
Yeah.
And so in a way, you have different modes converging upon something. And that's a signal to like notice, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
there's probably something more
Yeah,
to
both on the left and
here.
the right and the middle and whatever, everything exists. The same trends, you'll find them. There was a book called Crunchy Cons, right? And these are from Rod Dreher. He's a conservative, Orthodox author. And he wrote this book long time ago about, conservative Republicans who are doing organic food,
Yeah.
back to the land, ecological pastures
Yeah.
and everything.
Some people
But
pointed out that's what like the lefty hippies were doing.
yeah,
Like it's
so the ideology is different, but they have the same design,
yeah.
right?
But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm noticing as you're discussing, there are moments in time where ideas are what's needed. Like we need to free ourselves from our on the ground assumptions and find these ideas that become points of leverage for doing something else. But perhaps we're actually in a moment where it's the other way, where we're almost so bought into certain ideas that we need the land.
Oh yeah.
We need to ground ourselves. We need to embody ourselves.
I'm not a good example of that, by the way. I'm
No, but
unfortunately
it's
not a
like
good example of that. Yeah.
knowledge comes from many paths, right? And it's
Yeah.
not to say progress is not linear. It's not always more innovation, bigger is not always the answer. There's moments where you go back and forth, and we're in a moment, I think, where we need to like come down. Like what's useful now is a certain amount of conservatism, a certain amount of traditionalism, a certain amount of
That includes, right?
yeah, but it's not saying we're going back to something, right? I think that's what's frustrating with because people are so like enculturated by this left right
Yeah.
thing that like no, like there's a richness of middle ways that
Yeah.
are to be explored that takes the best of both, right?
Yeah. So, there's this tradition that I call integrative,
Mhm.
right? So I was schooled by Ken Wilber, and if you're familiar with his ideas, but it's so the basic idea is that until the Renaissance,
Yeah.
right, there was kind of like a spiritual unity in the whole world, some kind of a Neoplatonic synthesis about you know basically the ground of being or the divinity outside of time and place, and then it emanates into the material world, and then the material world evolves back to this higher thing, right? So it's descent and ascent.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then somehow in Europe we gave that up, and we became materialists and things like that. And so in the Renaissance, you still have a balance between matter and spirit,
Yeah.
right? And so there's one author I read, I found it very interesting. He said, well, you know, even Marx was still part of that, right? Because the so you have these mystics, Jacob Böhm, and then Hegel reads these mystics,
Uh-huh.
and so it calls it the warm tradition
Yeah.
because it recognizes spirit. Then you have the cold tradition, and these are the functionaries, technocrats, the engineers of the 19th century, and they hijack, and that's the Enlightenment, right? The Enlightenment is materialistic.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the integrative tradition is that we always have to marry the subjective and the objective.
Yeah.
So not become purely objectivist materialist, but take into account the subjective. So our feelings, our histories, our stories are just as real, right? And the only way to have a good life is to hold those two. Um, and so in terms of when you think about history, so the way I think about history is transcend and include. Like, what can we learn from indigenous people? Not to copy them,
Yeah.
because they were like few million on the
Yeah.
planet, and that was good for that, but we can't live with 7 billion people
No.
with these rules, right? But that doesn't mean we cannot learn from them.
Mhm.
And especially if we are going to regress, they'll survive,
Yeah.
and a lot of people in the cities will die, but that's another question. So then what I call the eggshell civilizations, the high religions, right? More complex agricultural societies, we have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah.
Medieval times, and I'm not saying this because I'm nostalgic, but
Huh.
Europe in the Middle Ages was a highly distributed, decentralized system
Yeah.
with free cities where farmers were bound to the land, but they had parishes, they had a spiritual life, they had their families,
Yeah.
um, they had no taxation, you know. They had a spiritual unity over a very long.
It seems like it's surely not a coincidence that Italy, which had these city-states,
Yeah.
which had a different balance of power than the rest of Europe, right,
Yeah.
was so core to the Renaissance and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is something that again that not many people know, but capitalism is in many ways an invention of Catholic monks.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Uh,
tell me more.
so most people, this is Max Weber, and they say Reformation is what created capitalism, but it started much earlier. Like,
Okay.
okay, the Cistercians, right? So basically, first you have the Benedictines. Saint Benedict is a Roman prefect. Then he leaves he becomes a hermit. They call him back. And so what happened in the 5th century was there was no more food in Italy because the food came from Egypt. When they lose control,
Yeah.
and you have slaves making olive oil and wine,
Uh-huh.
not enough to feed, right? So they create these spiritual communities, right? Where you have farmers, craftsmen, and intellectuals and mystics in one community dedicated to truth, beauty, and in 50 years they restore the food production in Italy, right? So the same thing happens in the 10th century all over Europe with the Cistercians, who, because by the time the Benedictines have become rich and corrupt, and so Saint Bernard says, these are the synagogues of Satan. We need to go back to poverty and obedience, and
Yeah.
anyway, so they do the same. They basically, triple the production of food in Europe in like 70 years. And here's how he reasons. This is very important. We owe everything to the divine,
Okay.
right? So we have to thank and pray as much as we can, 7 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to feed ourselves and not be dependent.
Yeah.
So we have to work very efficiently, right? So they are prayer maximizing enterprises.
So it's like God requires efficiency
Exactly.
in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they save, right? They don't use it for themselves egoically. They invest it in the community, in the growth of the system, right? So the way it works is if you have a large monastery after a certain time, they have to split in two, and like bees, they look for another place and they restart. And so what it means is that you're in medieval Europe, you have farmers who live in harmony with nature.
Yeah.
They don't work much in the winter. They have like 150 holidays.
Festivals and
They have
feast days.
Sunday, Day of the Lord. Monday's Day of the Family. It's called Blue Monday. 5-day working week. All these religious holidays. You can still see that in Thailand. In the villages in Thailand, like births, marriages, deaths, plus all the Buddhist, feasts. That's a lot of days where they're feasting instead of working, right?
Yeah.
So that was life in the Middle Ages. But the monks, they're the working bees. They have to get up at 4,
Yeah.
and sleep only 4 hours, and then.
But you had this specialized class to do that.
And so, basically capitalism comes back not by the luxury trade of the rich, aristocracy, but by the surplus of the monks. They create mass markets outside of the monastery. And so the whole idea, is to save. These are Christian virtues,
Yeah.
right? And they're pushed by the Dominicans and the Franciscans in the Italian city-state. And because they are not spending their money, they need the bankers, right?
Right.
And purgatory allows Christians to become bankers. So it's very intricate.
Yeah.
So originally, capitalism was actually rooted in a Christian value system.
Yeah.
And I want to say one more thing. So classic Greece and Rome, work is for the slaves. Work is bad. In order to be a citizen, you need not to work.
Yeah.
And focus on the meaning of life, as a citizen. And philosophy, right? The Christians say, no. Ora et labora, right? Which praying and work are equivalent. The resurrection of the body means matter is sacred.
Yeah.
Matter will be spiritualized. And that creates a whole new situation where work becomes salvific. By working and creating beauty in the world,
Yeah.
I make the world more like the divine plan.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, I think the Reformation destroyed a lot of it because it
Mm.
makes work into a commodity again,
Yeah.
right? And that's basically, I think, when it went wrong.
Yeah. You
Because
also
now you have to sell your labor, you do meaningless work just because you have to survive, and that created a lot of alienation.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm scared to, like, go down another tangent with you 'cause I wanna ask a question, but just, like, I do observe sort of, what do systems produce, right? And if we look at architecture as one example, and just buildings are this ugly now, and everything it's some combination of regulation and the market, right? That's, like, basically incentivizes you to create
Yeah.
just versus if you do your labors, like, your labor honors God, it honors
Yeah.
your craft, it's for your community. I think
Exactly.
people build differently.
We missed that.
Yeah.
I think so. I think what happened is, with reason, right? Reason is a good thing by
Yeah.
itself, but it became like calculated reason
Yeah.
under capitalism. So
It
the
has to be used
accounting,
for something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and I think whether you're left or right, if you're a manager today,
Mhm.
you're counting
Yeah.
how many hours do you work, how many do you produce, and every subjective like well-being is all being pushed on the side. And we need to reintegrate. That's integrative, right?
Yeah.
You need to reintegrate that into, and then of externalities, right? So we
To
create
capture.
value through extraction. So this is a very important thing. So take 3 nurses.
Okay.
Okay, the first nurse is a religious nurse.
Yeah.
She is volunteering. She gets food and shelter. She lives in a monastery.
Yeah.
That's how it used to be. Hospitals used to be Christian hospitals in the West, right? She's not counted in GDP
Yeah.
because there's no money involved,
Mhm.
right? So she's neutral.
But she's not tracking that either, right?
No,
She's probably not thinking,
no, no.
she's like, "Oh, I've clocked in
Yeah,
today,"
yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
GDP neutral, right? Then you have the second nurse, and she's working for a public hospital under the welfare system. She's getting paid by the state. She costs money,
Uh-huh.
right? The third nurse works for a private hospital and creates profit. She's adding to GDP.
Yeah.
So we have in my view, perverted value system because
Yeah.
we ignore all kinds of contributions like care, maintaining the networks, maintaining the ecology. All that is like pushed out, and we think value is only scarce commodity.
Yeah.
And so I talk about commons economics as a refoundation of economics around contribution.
Yeah.
So think about contribution, positive and negative, social, ecological,
Mm.
right? These are 4 different forms of value. They need to be integrated in our new value system. So I come back to accounting. Accounting created a state,
Yeah.
right? The priests in the temples in Mesopotamia managing irrigation and the grain silos created accounting.
Yeah.
And there's a fantastic book called Against the Grain from what's his name? Okay, I forgot his name. But it shows that this is about Thailand, by the way. This is called Zumia, right? Zumia is all the mountains, Thailand, Burma, Laos,
Mhm.
where people didn't pay taxes
Right.
because they would grow root vegetables that cannot be seen
Ah,
by the state officials, right? So in order to have a state made grain or rice,
right.
which grows up and they can count it and then tax it.
Mhm.
Okay. But anyway, accounting created the state. Double entry book accounting, invented by a Franciscan monk,
Yeah.
Paccio, I think. He created the private enterprise,
Mhm.
capitalism. Now in Web3, we are creating contributory accounting, flow accounting, and thermodynamic accounting.
Okay.
So we are integrating externalities
Right.
in our accounting system. And blockchain is the first universal ledger.
Yeah.
So every ledger before was a private ledger, either from a company or a state. So am I doing well?
Right.
No systemic vision.
Mm.
Now, if you join a DAO, you are in an ecosystem. And if you join an open source system, you're in an ecosystem, you can see what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea that I have for the next civilization is we have a ground layer of what I call stigmergy. Stigmergy comes from biology, from signaling by the ants and the bees. But
Mhm.
how do they know what to do?
Right.
Because they leave pheromones or they dance.
Yeah.
And the other bees and ants, they know what to do, right? That's what we do in open source. Like we have an open ecosystem, and if I write something about Buddhism in Wikipedia, anybody can see, oh, that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's not there. I can add this, right? Same with open source software or design. So we have creating stigmergic
Yeah.
collaboration at massive scale.
There's something that comes through that you haven't said like literally, but to me, it's these echoes of faith and trust.
Yeah.
You do these things not because you're counting on what you get out of them, but
Right.
because you're more focused on just the doing and the giving, the contribution.
Yeah.
And that there's a trust in that, like, I don't need to be given a reason
I go first
to do this. Yeah.
I'd say that I sometimes say thou is Jesus. Why? That makes case. Okay. And I don't mean any disrespect for believers, but I just you remember I said moti,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of DAOs don't work. I think probably most of them don't work, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And Web3 is still growing, and it's because it's a belief.
Yeah.
It's a belief that we are constructing a new future, and that can move mountains.
Yeah.
Right. So in that sense, it's more than just a rational response.
Yeah.
It's intuition that many people have that the principles that are baked in these designs are actually what will bring our world to the next stage. Right?
I'm with you in this. I think I can look at the technological, physical underpinnings as I understand it. I'm not a master of any particular study, but I can sort of like see things there. But I also feel it.
Yeah.
I think spiritually,
Yeah.
that there is a moment.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense to me that we are using technology, we're using code to sort of we are sort of honoring human life force in a new way, right? Suddenly we have the opportunity to do this because, we had to count, right? We needed paper and we needed people to go out and survey. We created this bureaucratic class. You spoke about the Romans sort of saying like, oh, well, now this is a stable career for my family to go to.
Yeah.
This is a dangerous age because bureaucracy is possibly about to get wiped out by like some combination of AI and blockchain, right? And that's like a secure life for a lot of people.
I think our class is going to be wiped out.
And the knowledge class, or what do you mean?
Yeah, because we lived from the state.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the coalitions that are in play in the culture war, the Trump coalition, they are doing things to destroy the knowledge class, right? Because it's hostile to them.
Yeah. They don't need it. They don't want the deep state and all of that.
Yeah,
right?
they're market oriented, right?
Yeah.
And this is important. There's a difference between Anglo-Saxon populists and European.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because the Anglo-Saxons are very libertarian, and so they always, introduce market, and I think they're way too sympathetic to the oligarchy, right? So the thing is, Trump will promise lots of things to the people, the MAGA section of his alliance. So then when it does a tax reform, it's always, it's not good for the bottom, it's good for the top. In Europe, if you see why Orban and the Polish, why they stayed so long in power and why they win elections, because they come from the Christian Democrats, right?
Okay.
And so they adhere to the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. So they have an inbuilt idea of the social contract. So if you look at where the working class is the happiest, it's in Europe. They do surveys. It's Poland and Hungary, because if you're working class woman and you want children, if you have 3 children, you get 700 zlotys. You're happy, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they're strong, right?
Yeah.
And so why they don't lose popular support, which is in America, it's like this cycle where they win and then they lose because they actually don't fulfill their public
Yeah.
promises.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so interesting to me because I'm hearing over and over again. I think you were saying the system can't help but express itself.
Yeah.
It can't help but express the fundamental, its fundamental architecture. It will be revealed. And so this to me loops very beautifully. And I guess about why for me from both from an intellectual and professional and world of ideas side, as well as I think from my sort of maternal, spiritual hope for the world side, it is so interesting to think about this new world that we can create through
Yeah.
Web3, bioregionalism, regenerative, like these villages that we create, they are just a much healthier expression because we have the
necessary
technology.
for our health, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's two ways to transcend, right? One is the vertical, which is so there is this guy called Viktor Frankl, Man in Search of Meaning.
Yeah.
He was in the concentration camps, came out. He said only two groups survived: the Catholics and the communists. The Catholics, because they had a vertical transcendence, the heaven and the divine, but the communists because they believed in their future,
Yeah.
right? So they project the
Mhm.
transcendence in the material world in the future.
Yeah.
Um, and so if you are in a descending cycle as we are, is that is your vision of,
Yeah.
then you have all the reason to be pessimistic.
Yeah.
But if you can have a longer vision, and see through the cycles, then instead of identifying with the caterpillar who's going to become mush,
Yeah.
you identify with the butterfly,
Yeah.
right? I just recently heard it's even different DNA, right?
Oh,
The
really?
caterpillar and they're like different DNA. They
It gives you a
create
whole like Theseus ship analogy in a
yeah,
new way, right?
that like their brain is gonna be different. It's not the same. It's almost like another being,
Yeah.
But anyway, so if you focus on the seed forms, that's much better for your psychological and spiritual health
Yeah.
than if you hold on to a system that is disintegrating.
Yeah. I want to come back to this discussion about digital nomads and remote workers and sort of talk about global mobility because you and I are interesting case studies of this, I will say,
Right.
because I want to discuss integration in this sort of new world order with global mobility, cosmolocalism, where people are free from just nation states, passports in the ways that we've necessarily thought about them for a long time. Because I think this is a very difficult question to answer, and I think the challenge is how to do things on a faster timescale, perhaps. Because so my father was in the Peace Corps, and he met my mother while she was studying. And then they created me, and here I am, a bridge between cultures. I've done a lot of community building in Chiang Mai. I like to connect people, and that feels like my gift that I get to give to the world, and that's my privilege, right? That's me knowing how to speak Thai, having Thai citizenship. I get to do this. Like, I am the bridge builder, but this is I am a generational artifact, right? I'm a creature of that. And you are, you were of the knowledge creator class that you did not need to stay in Belgium in order to pursue your career. You chose to live in Chiang Mai. Your wife is Thai. Your children have grown up here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So then, and your kids are pretty integrated, right? You were
Or
telling me,
they're half Thai, and yeah, my son is more like identifies himself more with Western
mm-hmm.
culture. He wants to work in Belgium.
Yeah,
He's finished his studies. He doesn't like the work culture here. And my daughter is like completely like the almost an exemplary Thai girl.
yeah,
The way she moves around, and
yeah,
so she identifies more with her mother, I guess, and with Thai culture. So they made their choices. They have the same parents, but they make a different mix.
yeah. To me, this is natural integration.
Yeah.
And this is what people have always done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if we're trying to sort of grease the wheels for this for turning this new world order,
Right.
we'll say, right? Like there and we want to do this across borders, across cultures, we have this intellectual class who maybe are on a like the privilege of digital nomads and this ability to earn in dollars, pounds, euros, and come spend it in places with a lower cost of living, like Thailand, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like this moment of leverage is short, right? And we want to
Yeah.
figure out how to do this well. Like, what are your thoughts about integration? Because this is the obvious one, very local. Like,
Yeah.
you may be starting a business with like a local partner. That's a slightly shorter time scale of a way to
Yeah.
integrate. But these things are all hard to scale. Like, how do you think we answer this question? How do we integrate remote workers and the knowledge economy to benefit the land?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know how long this moment will last, right?
Yeah.
But I think there is something structural about it. I think there is, because of the technology and our ability to actually do remote work,
Yeah.
right? I think it may be more long term.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as we go into crisis mode,
Yeah.
right, then it becomes a bit more dangerous because we talked about this before we came here to the studio. The riots in Mexico, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And there was something similar in Puerto Rico, right? So there are already revolts against digital nomads. Also in Honduras, like Prospera has a lot of issues
Pushback.
with the new government there, right? And I think that's very important. It's
Yeah.
the idea that you can just like arbitrage, that is not a good long-term solution, right? That makes you into more like an exit or a selfish strategy.
Yeah.
So the long term is, yeah, no, I'm not sure how to do this.
Yeah.
But I think so. One path is, integrating in the nation,
Mm-hmm.
in the national community as it exists. So, I'm married with a Thai woman, and I'm not sure I integrate that much actually. Thailand is a bit special, right? I mean, I don't know if you agree with this. So Thai people are very friendly, but they put you in a box if you're fra,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I know many people, even people are married, and they say, "No, I don't have Thai friends, even after
Yeah.
30 years." Um, I don't have Thai friends, but I have Thai friends in my Thai family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of the
Yeah.
family, right? Um, so that's not always easy, right? To integrate. But I think there's different ways to integrate also translocal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you have a network of eco villages.
Yeah.
And these eco villages are more or less integrated, right? Because they have local relationships and stuff. So there is the integration, but then the digital nomads can be this extra layer, right? Of you know kind of enriching the communities because of their interconnections,
Yeah.
right? So that's basically how I see it. Is that
Yeah.
this it's not necessarily always like integrating into a fixed national community. But I think we will have these kinds of neo kills that will emerge,
Yeah.
which are really cosmolocal.
I almost wonder if it's can be almost like the reverse Amish. I think the Amish and like the Mennonites are very interesting because they're very intentional about what technology
Yeah,
they absorb,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so they're an interesting case study
right.
for us to be like, oh, what's actually good about modernity and technology, because they haven't just said yes to everything
Yeah,
the same
and
way
I
we
think I
collectively
think we
have.
are going back to that.
Yeah.
So the aim is, so you have these big waves of change, right? And the Amish were the revolutionaries of the Reformation, right? They were the collectivists of the Reformation, and they were chased away.
Yeah.
And that's why they are, everywhere in the world except in Germany, because they were chased away. They were too radical for their time. And so they stopped basically at the 17th century, right? Their technology is 17th century technology mostly, right? I feel the same, and maybe it's my age, but at the individual level, I don't feel any new tech is making my life better. I think every new tech is making my life worse.
Mm.
So I now have a lifestyle where I don't open my computer before 1 p.m.
Hmm.
I never take my computer when I move.
Yeah.
I always close my mobile phone when I'm in a meeting. I want to be there physically. I
Yeah.
want to listen to you in it. Um, and so I can imagine, now they're interdicting phones in schools. There's a whole movement about, because I think it's doing a lot of harm.
Yeah.
I think that,
Very different from
yeah,
Thailand's policy of like, we want a tablet for every child, which
well,
is
yes, I think,
an idea that was idealizing technology.
IQ is collapsing,
Yeah.
mental health is collapsing, and there are many statistical studies showing a very precise correlation
Mm-hmm.
with the introduction of the smartphone,
Yeah.
much more than the computer. The smartphone is not good. Um, of course, I have one.
Yep.
Uh, but here's what I dream about. I don't know if it's realistic. I'm
Yeah.
not a pedagogical expert,
Yeah.
but I think we should have an education which is kind of like uh, phase appropriate, right?
Yeah. Like developmental phase.
Yeah, so I think small children
Yeah.
should do gardening
Yeah.
and, use their hands and use their bodies and move around. Then you introduce uh, maybe crafts and, industrial, like
Yeah.
making stuff together, then abstract thinking,
Yeah.
right? And then tech.
Yeah.
I mean, the cognitive tech. So
Yeah.
I think we should give more time. And how do we do that? I don't think we can do that in society at large. So I think communities will have to do that. It's like
Yeah.
one community that I follow a little bit, and I'm not a Christian like as a believer, but I'm interested in like my cultural tradition.
Yeah.
It's called the Bruderhof. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So a few people in Nazi Germany create a community. They want to follow the act of the apostles, right?
Uh-huh.
Communal life as a Christian. They get kicked out. They go to England, and so they have their own apartment as a family, but they all eat together in the evening.
Yeah.
They get all the material stuff they need from a collective. So their clothes, everything they need, there's like a store. They get it from the store. How they make a living, they have a company doing wooden toys, and they have pilots for private planes,
Yeah.
right? Now they're like 12,000 of them, and they are very rich. They're buying
Yeah.
lakes, they're buying old monasteries from the abandoned, from the Catholic
Yeah.
Church, and they have internet, but in the library.
Yes.
So this is the thing, and they have book clubs. They read. They're all university educated. They have halfway houses in big cities where
Yeah.
they can study. Um, I mean, they're like engineers, pilots. Um, okay, I'm not gonna do that kind of life because I don't have that belief system. But what it does, it shows me it can be done,
Yes.
right? It shows me that you can have intentional communities they can do well, that they can be adapted to modernity.
Yeah.
Um,
You don't need to reject technology.
no, but you can master it as the Amish do, but you know they have a particular way.
You have a slider to control exactly where you want it,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You have that choice.
Yeah.
And that's baked into intentional, right? It's
Yeah.
saying we're not just going to receive the background culture and just say,
Yeah, I spent some time with the Amish. I made a documentary in the late 90s called Technocalypse, The Metaphysics of Technology and the End of Man.
huh,
Spent 4 months traveling around the US, and it was about transhumanism.
yeah.
And we made a grid for or against technology from a spiritual or scientific point of view. So deep ecology against technology from scientific point of view.
Yeah.
Extropians for technology from a scientific point of view. The Amish against technology from a spiritual point of view, and then people like Théa Chardin, the noosphere, positive about technology. Anyway, and so I spent some time with the Amish, Harrisburg, there.
Yeah.
And the first criteria was like, is what does the Bible say, right? And the second criteria is what will it do to our community? And that's how they judge technology, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very
How
key.
will it benefit me personally, but how does it affect us, the children too, right? You know, I'd love to hear your sort of thoughts as we bring this This has been such a fun conversation, but it has to end at some point. But, you know, in the fiction and fantasy I read, there's something about like names, right? Names give us power. Names can be powerful. And I think the name Amagi that has been chosen for our project is based on an ancient Sumerian word, right? That means return to mother. But it has this meaning, and this is something you spoke to of emancipation from bondage, from debt.
Right.
And there's symbolism there that
That
I think we
should
should
read
not
Michael
miss out.
Vexen, by the way. He has 2 books about the history of debt in ancient Mesopotamia. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah. So here we've been talking about, I think, accounting and code, these are the precursors to the internet and the
Right.
blockchain, right? And like all the Web3 architecture that we are free to play with.
Yeah.
But there's also this return, so there's this beautiful symmetry I think for the different aspects of Amagi that we're exploring. And I sort of, yeah, are you familiar with this like Sumerian term at all?
No.
Yeah. No, it's so I'm just curious, like in terms of when it comes to, I think, the language of symbols,
Right.
is there something to you? Because I think it's not obvious to some people, this connection between like the digital world
Right.
and this like and nature. Because for some people they just see that as opposites. But to me there's a
So
unifying thread. Like, do you see
I'm
it?
not exactly a good example myself
Yeah.
because I'm actually very disconnected from nature.
Mm.
Um, I've always been very intellectual and I'm really uh, drawn to
Yeah.
that. My wife is the gardener in the family,
Yeah.
and so I like a lot to live in the green and I like European forests and walking on the trails in Belgium. But yeah, I'm not that much connected to natural life. So what I've been done is more in a different direction. So so I did a study of civilizational change and I came
Yeah.
up with this seed form theory, right? And so then this is like 20 years ago, I started really looking at seed forms
Yeah.
and seeing what is the vocabulary
Yeah.
that is used by these new communities.
Yes.
So I use a lot of new words
Yeah.
and people think I invent them, but no, I don't invent them. I take them from groups that are using them,
You
right?
popularize them.
Yeah, popularize them. I put them together. So I synthesize, I integrate, I try to make a narrative. So basically, the first level is I want to be true, right? So is it factual?
Yes.
Maybe something that I thought would work didn't work. I have to be ready to change my mind on that basis. Then, from the things we know, what is the most sense we can make of it? Like, what
Yeah.
is the highest possible integration that we can make, right? And then the third level would be how can we use that for human emancipation?
Yeah.
So that's the way I work, right? But I have one particular way that I didn't develop, but is kind of in that sense. So I talk about neo-traditionalism,
Yeah.
right? So what connects us to pre-modern, pre-industrial
Mm.
civilizations is that we don't focus on the material.
Yeah.
So you have pre and post material.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know what's his name again. It's called World Values Survey, right? And I believe in developmental growth, right? So you have the material world
Mm-hmm.
and it's subject to climate change and geographic and spatial. And then you have how societies respond to their physical environment. So that's the social organization, right? And then you have, well, actually how we see the world and how we see the organization actually also depends on our framing,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And I always try to look at the three at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so hunter gatherers have a certain level of looking at the world, which is in tune
Yeah.
with the level of complexity of their world. They live in small groups. They know a lot about local and about, natural things. Now, once you move to agricultural, irrigation, mining, now you need to think about tens of thousands of people working together, level of complexity, and then it goes up like right. But one of the so and so he says there's pre-material civilization, who favor non-material values,
Okay.
enlightenment, salvation, So, basically the world religions, right? Then you have materialist civilizations, and then you have post-material. And I think he's right in saying you cannot just jump easily from one to the other. For example, if you go to Thai villages, right?
Hmm.
Most dynamic people will leave the village.
Yeah.
They won't use the technology to leapfrog to a higher level of community. They don't.
Right.
They have to go through, right? But the thing is that we've reached a stage where a lot of people in the West have reached a post material stage, right? So having is not the key, but experiencing becomes the key. And so my idea is, can we find some connection between people who live and want to live, in their indigenous traditional ways, and can use technology to defend themselves, to improve their life without having to go through
Right.
the industrial material phase, right? And the same for the people here, right? In the post material, can we learn from indigenous people to reorganize ourselves in, in harmony with nature? And that's, I think, where that comes in, where,
Yeah.
so I'm not doing it myself, but I think it's very interesting to find that connection and to, find these concepts which had meaning, in that kind of hunter gathering and horticultural stage, right? But then apply them in new ways and adaptive ways to create. Because I think what we're doing is neo tribal, right? Neo kinship. So there's kinship. Kinship gets weakened in civilizational models, agriculture and industry and cognitive. And now we are trying to recreate new types of kinship. We so if we don't have kinship, we cannot just go back.
Yeah.
It's very hard to just go back, right? My wife still lives in kinship, but my family in Europe, we can't do it. We just can't do it. It doesn't. It's gone, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of peer to peer is trying to recreate kinship on a new basis
Yeah.
and using technology to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of the beautiful opportunity that we have in front of us
Yeah.
is, what's that community-based hole
Yeah. Yeah.
in my heart? What's that God-shaped hole in my
Yeah.
heart? And
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
find
Yeah.
a new way to fill
Yeah.
it.
And I want to say one more thing. So this is some from these integral theories. They talk about first tier and second tier modes of
Mhm.
consciousness, right? First tier is when you think that that what you think is your level is the good one, and all the ones below or that you have replaced are the bad ones.
Ah,
So typically, like actual religions will repress magic and animism. They, witch burnings
yeah.
and stuff, right? Rationalists will repress the church,
Yes.
right? And a lot of identitarians want to repress,
Right.
so the other way would be transcend and include, is that
Yeah.
every stage, every level is appropriate for certain things and not appropriate for other things. Can we be transparent about it? And for example, if I'm in love, I better use poetry,
Yeah.
right? Which is a form of like magical connection with the world, right? If I build a bridge, it's better if I think like an engineer.
Yeah.
And so, and you don't condemn the others, right? And this is like a very big thing in university, and I don't think we find a good way. So we have, on the one hand, the old rationalist ideology, which has like animism, indigeneity is like, no, that is not valuable. It's not rational. So we reject it. Now under these identity politics, now we say, well, it's all equivalent. I don't think that's good either.
Yeah.
I think they're appropriate for different things, right? And we have to learn that. And it's an open question. Sorry for the complicated,
No,
but
no, I think it's wonderful. It weaves together
yeah,
this conversation so well. I think your contribution to the world is definitely helping us to look at things structurally so that when we make these choices,
Yeah.
we do them in a way that's grounded, well thought out, and intentional.
Yeah. And so so that's why I think, we should respect traditions in that way, right? So I think Christianity and Buddhism and Taoism, they're great traditions and we have to learn from them.
Yeah.
But I also think about Marxism and Freudianism in that way. They're long traditions that have maybe not that long, but a few hundred years. Not all of it is bad, right?
Mhm.
So is there something we can retain from it that has value? Then I don't see why we should reject it,
Yeah.
right? And so the same from the left and the right. You know, there's valuable viewpoints on the left of the spectrum. There are valuable viewpoints on the right of the spectrum.
Right.
And can we be open about it?
Yeah. Without
Maybe
being a cultural relativist is like
exactly.
everything is equal. It's actually no, like there is something valid
So
to be
all evil
taken.
comes from structure, or evil comes from culture. Well, maybe from both, and maybe there's solutions in the structural field that we can combine with solutions in the cultural field, right? And make them work together.
Thank you, Michelle. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, and please keep me updated on your community. I wasn't aware of it, so
Yeah.
I'm very happy to learn about this.
Yes, definitely. Hopefully, we can continue this conversation perhaps in person on
Right.
Gapangan someday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Lily Zabo, and this has been the Amagi Village podcast. Amagi is the ancient Sumerian word for return to mother. It's also the earliest denotation of emancipation and freedom. Not freedom through escape, but through return, through restoration, integration, through rebirth. The world is quickly changing, and the myth of modernity is coming undone. Progress is not linear, and to thrive in the coming age, we can't keep living in the matrix and just hoping for the best. It's time to embark on bold experiments. We don't claim to know what the answer is, but we know it won't come from ideology. This isn't a cult, it's not a brand. Amagi is an invitation for those who don't just play with new ideas, but are ready to live them, to walk the talk, to build the future. The Amagi Village podcast documents our journey of discovery. We're learning in public from technologists and tribal elders, from philosophers and farmers. Let's reimagine the future together. Please visit amagi.life to learn more. That's amagi.life.